Bob, the first set of questions, basically when and where you were born and kind of describe your childhood growing up, where you went to school, that kind of thing.
Cleveland, Ohio, January 9, 1925, which is also Richard Nixon's birth date, not 25, but
yeah.
Anyhow, Cleveland, Ohio, and parochial schools through the 12th grade in the Cleveland, well, parochial school through the 8th grade, 9th grade, and then public school, high school in the 11, 12, 10, 11, 12. Also, John Carroll University, both in Cleveland, both the master's and bachelor's degrees.
Okay. What year did you graduate high school?
1942.
1942. So you were in high school when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
I was, yes, and I was in the 11th grade and 16 years old at that point. I was in watching a big band show on December 7th, and as I walked in, 2:30 in the afternoon precisely, usherette said to the ticket taker, "Did you hear that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?" I heard nothing else the rest of the afternoon. Watched Jan Savitt and his Top Hatters, 2 stage shows, which we always did, and then a poor movie in between. Then went down to what they called the Telenews Theater that evening at 6 o'clock, and my recollection is very vivid about 2 guys that were there. I went down there, this was close to Public Square in Cleveland, about a half a block away. They had all the news bulletins, Associated Press, whoever, International, whoever existed at that time, on the front of the theater, so I knew I could find out whatever happened. 2 guys out there, one guy said, "Oh, they were crazy attacking, we'll wipe them out." The other guy said, "Oh no, don't kid yourself. This is going to be a long war." Here I am, this 16-year-old kid, and I'm thinking, maybe I'm going to have to go to war.
And you turned out you did.
Well,
yeah, down the road. When were you drafted, or did you enlist?
I was a volunteer draftee 2 months after I was 18, trying to get into the Air Force at that time, and it didn't work. And I wound up in the 75th Division, of all places, Camp Perry, Ohio induction, and then Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which I wound up with the 70th Division in the next year.
Oh, okay. So how long did you train with the 75th before you transferred to
the 75th? I had about 6 months, and I took the Air Cadet exams, which I was trying to get into in the first place.
Right.
Went to Amarillo, Texas, and then the University of Montana, because I didn't have college.
Right.
They got overloaded. I was in the top 2 percentile for bombardier school. I was tested. That never happened.
Yeah.
And got shipped to Camp Adair, Oregon.
And that's when you joined the 70th.
And the 70th, and then...
what year or month was that?
That was in April...
44?
44. Yeah, April, about April. And we went, we were at Adair. That's where I got my PFC, incidentally. And then I was a company messenger. I volunteered to be a bugler in Company A. We had a dance band, and that's a long story. That's the whole story of my 70th participation.
Okay. And so I guess you had a music background before you joined then?
Yes, I did. And it wasn't formally trained, but I had quite a bit of music from the time I was in the 11th grade. In fact, my recollection is I first got paid for playing a job $2 when I was 14 years old.
Oh, there you go. And so I guess then you kind of followed that in the Army, where they tapped you.
Well, I did 2 things. I had, now that you mention that, Steve, in the 75th, I have a picture with me, in fact, of the dance band I played in there.
Right.
I was in division headquarters, and I drove a car twice in my life, maybe before I went in, and I was put in the motor platoon of division headquarters. I learned to drive there, though, and I was driving everything inside of 2 months. Everything. I mean, the 6x6s, anything they, how to back a trailer properly, everything.
Well, being I guess...
and then in the Air Force in Montana, I also had a band in our it wasn't much of a band, but I did, and so I was active that way. And at the 70th, by that time, you know, there's a factor, I don't like to mention it exactly, but the morale building in the Air Force was unbelievable. We had, I guess we considered a West Point style. We didn't eat at attention, but we had to stand at parade rest in the chow line, for instance, you know. So everything was and the morale building in the Air Force was very important. I didn't want to be out of the Air Force, you know. So I volunteered to be bugler when I got to the 70th.
Yeah.
They needed one in Company A because I didn't have to pull guard or KP.
Well, there you go. Now, tell me the story behind. Now, you were with, I guess, the regimental band.
Now, what we had was a dance band. Okay. This is the Blues Chasers it became. And Colonel Conley came, and they had deactivated regimental bands. He was a West Pointer. He wanted a regimental band. We had the dance band. It was very good. And of course, I participated in that as the librarian, the pianist, and I also was serving Company A as bugler. I wasn't a very good bugler because I never played bugle before. And but I was very adequate when I had a couple of guys, and when we blew retreat, for instance, we maybe had three buglers, and I was very adequate when I had the other two guys with, you know, with support.
Right.
I remember I blew some poor calls when I was by myself, but I was very good with mess call.
Yeah, okay.
Ba, 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 ba.
There you go. Did you play a lot at Camp Adair and Fort Leonard Wood?
At Wood particularly, and Sam Conley, I mentioned to somebody this morning, when we're talking about an employee-boss relationship, very often we talk about cross loyalties. What happened, Sam Conley said to us, you keep that, he wanted a band. He said, you keep that band going. He says, when you get overseas, I'm pulling you out of your companies, you're coming into regimental headquarters. He did that in Marseille, when we got to Marseille in December. And I was the librarian and pianist. I got our library, excuse me, somehow onto the Mariposa in Boston. I carried that thing with all my equipment. I had it in a box.
When you say library, is this a library of music?
The band music.
Oh, okay, okay.
We had 12 musicians at that point. On the Mariposa, 10 days, we played in a small studio on the boat with a piano with 6 guys for the whole ship each night as we were going across. We got to Marseille and Colonel Conley did what he said. He pulled us out of our companies. We had a corporal on rotation, Bud McChesney, who was our 3rd trumpeter. He knew all the business about overseas. We marched 14 miles on Christmas Eve with full field pack, everything. Now, I don't know what happened to the library, which at that point was bound up in about this big, you know, was the books for each musician.
Right.
And so we got that over there. Bud McChesney on Christmas night, after we marched 14 miles off the train on Christmas Eve, had us playing a dance for an evac hospital in, what the heck was the name of the town? It began with a B.
Was it Brumath?
Yeah, thank you. Brumath. And we played a dance for this evac hospital. My recollection of that is a funny bit. It's they had a tub of something with grapefruit juice. I don't know what kind of alcohol they put in there, but I remember I had a cup of that stuff while we were playing, and it almost, you know, it was potent. And at 12 o'clock, after we finished the job, which was about 11, we were standing guard out in front of the CP.
Oh.
Now, we didn't play that week of Christmas. We had various, then we were in regimental headquarters. We played a small group on New Year's Eve for, I think it was Service Company or somebody. And then we didn't see our instruments for the whole month of January. Now, we were a guard platoon, but we were put in charge of the supply room in regimental headquarters. In the month of January, we moved that CP 15 times. I had muscles that I couldn't believe I had. We had 2 truckloads of equipment and supplies.
So you're moving every other day just about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
15 times.
Wow. So once you got through Nordwind and all, and just the anything particular happened during that period for you?
Not except doing our whatever guard duty we were assigned to and handling that supply room.
Right.
Okay? Now that was a duty, and I had an interest. I'll tell you later. But I had an interesting situation in the Chicago reunion 2 years ago. But the 1st of February, we had an executive officer whose name I don't remember, and he got pneumonia. We considered him an older guy. He had gray hair. Maybe he was 45 or 50. I don't know. But he got sent home. And Colonel Cheeves, who didn't want to let the guys go originally into regimental headquarters from his battalion, came and replaced this officer, became executive officer, and the first day he was there, I think it was February 1st, he said, "Where's that band? We hadn't played in a month." That morning, we were on a truck going back to Strasbourg, getting our instruments. That afternoon, of course, I wasn't playing because we didn't have a piano on the truck, but of course, I was the librarian, so I was taking care of that. And we were running around the reserve areas that afternoon playing, and I vividly remember guys leaning out of the windows and cheering because they heard our music, the music. Our music, I'm talking U.S., I'm talking, and we had good arrangements, we had a good book. We had good men, we had a good band.
Yeah.
Never, unfortunately, never got a recording of it.
Oh, that's too bad.
And so then we had various duties. We played whenever we could. One day, I remember, we played in the morning someplace, and we had, when we moved into Germany, the first place we found a piano, a brand new Spinet, we commandeered it. Somebody said to me the other day, if you did that in Iraq now, they'd throw you in jail.
They're probably true.
And I said, yeah, we commandeered this Spinet piano. It was pretty new and it was good shape. It got lashed on the truck. And what happened was when we went to play, we had the 2 trucks and we were all set up with our music stands and everything on the trucks. And we'd pull into someplace, back up the trucks together, start to play. And the one day we did that in the morning, and we were moving someplace for the afternoon. And none of us had ranks. We had no table of organization. That's why we were all PFCs, except Corporal McChesney, who had already had his corporal stripes. And Bill Schneeweiss was our leader. He was a trumpet player. And he got told that we had an option to go up to this town in the afternoon. They had a barrage there in the morning. He didn't tell us that, but he just said, we're going, you know. If he'd have told us that, we would have all said anyhow we're going. And so we went there in the afternoon. Colonel Conley, I remember, thought that was fabulous, that he talked about putting us in for a Bronze Star for doing this brave act. Well, we didn't. I have a niece in Boston. Her father was in Army Ordnance, and he almost got caught in the bulge. And she talked to me on email sometime earlier this year about being a hero in World War II. I said, no. I said, we did not have that attitude. We did what we had to do. And in our case, it was relatively safe, but even if you were in a line company, you did what you had to do.
Right. Right.
You know, so
that was the job.
So we did all that playing. For instance, duties.
Yeah.
Perimeter of a town. Check every vehicle at Saarbrücken. When we attacked Saarbrücken, we were placed on the perimeter of the town. Check every vehicle. Password. Watch out for. Well, they had that thing about watch out for Germans in American uniforms and all that.
Yeah.
We were stopping every vehicle, and I remember there were some. Officers in vehicles that had some pretty new-looking uniforms on, but you couldn't tell. They had passwords, so that was the important thing.
Right.
And then we in Forbach, I was with another guy. We got the assignment: patrol the street, after the fighting was, we had a mortar emplacement. I remember in the backyard or something, was throwing stuff out. But we had to patrol the street. Now, one of us was on one side, and the other guy on the other side. Well, you didn't know who was in the buildings or anything. That's simpler than it sounds, you know. Here comes a guy up the street in a long dark coat, I remember. He's waddling up the street, a little guy. I don't know how old he was or anything. And we stop him. He says, free French, free French. And he had a password. We had a password in French. He had it. So we had to let him go, naturally. And he walked off. I remember that. And he looked so funny. But that was just a humorous kind of an incident on the one hand, but we didn't know who he was or what he was doing in the first place. So you had those kinds of incidents. I remember we were placed on the perimeter of a town at 4 o'clock in the morning. This one was bad. We're out there, 2 of us, 3 of us, and nothing's happening.
Right.
7 o'clock, it's light. I said, let's clean our guns. You know how you clean your guns? You shoot them. So here's a telephone pole with insulators.
Oh, boy.
So we start shooting at the insulator. What we forgot was, if you were on guard duty like that, or any, 3 shots was a warning of danger or emergency. Out comes the corporal of the guard, who was McChesney. They hit a telephone pole or something in the middle of the road and almost turned the Jeep over. And he comes up to us, what the hell are you guys doing? And he's going through this thing. Oh my God, that's right, we weren't supposed to shoot. So we got chewed to high heaven. Now, when combat ended, went across the river to Beabrish. Then we became, in regimental headquarters, a special service platoon. We had a movie operator, George Ambler, who also played euphonium and baritone horn, joined us, and he played in the marching band. When we marched, I played cymbals, and I also sometimes played bass drum. I saw a picture yesterday here. I don't know where I saw it. Oh, I know where. In one of the books in the upstairs. The last time the regiment marched as a whole unit, July 4th, 1945. That day we padded the band. We got any guy that could play in it. By that time we had 16 guys. We had 24 on the 4th of July, 1945. I'm on bass drum, and I hadn't played bass drum for, my arms were falling. An hour and 45 minutes, I'm playing bass drum. And, oh my God. And that afternoon, they set up a platform on the river, next to the river. They had a regatta, they had a big field day. We played out there with the dance band, and had the piano out there and everything. Next to the river. We played on, during that summer, we played someplace almost every day.
It sounds like, I want to backtrack just a little bit. It sounds like you had a talented group of musicians that all had backgrounds in music.
Oh, we did.
Yeah. Can you kind of touch upon the individuals that were part of your band?
All right. My buddy, who's still in Philadelphia, and I talked to him 2 weeks ago, is Mo Hoffman. Our lead sax player is one of the top couple of calls that you would, in the union, if you have freelance musicians, you could say this guy's a first call or this guy's a second call. If they're looking for musicians, they call one guy first, you know. He was a first call in Philadelphia. He played in the Earl Theater, which was the theater that had all the stage shows and everything in Philadelphia. He was 32 years old then, I was 20. He mentored me. Mo is a tremendous guy. I talked to him, he's going to be 94 in October. He's in a retirement home now, but he's lucid, he's fine. He's a great sports fan, so am I. We've called each other when the Philadelphia Eagles are playing the Cleveland Browns during the game and talk about what's going on. And he's watching in Philadelphia, I'm watching in Cleveland. And he was one guy. Now Bill Schneeweiss, I sent him the library in about 1946 sometime when I came back. He was forming a band in Los Angeles. And I was back in the circulation. I joined the union then when I came back from the service, and I've been a union officer and everything since then. But he was outstanding. We did we had Artie Shaw's arrangement of Begin to Begin, and our baritone sax player was a guy from Miami. He was a little guy. And he had very actually greasy skin, and we called him the grease ball. But he was funny, and he used to move around when he played. And we had Artie Shaw's arrangement of Begin to Begin with the clarinet solo. We gave that to Sam to play, and he was the star on that arrangement. And we had all kinds of music like that. And I got a great library. While we were overseas, I got more library from New York. And we had all these what were called original manuscript arrangements of big band stuff. We had Les Brown, Bizet has his day, I remember. We had, you wouldn't even know, Steve, you're too young. Bobby Sherwood Orchestra had a tune called Elks Parade. We had Benny Goodman's Mission to Moscow. We created our own show. And Mo, for instance, and we had a couple of comedians, a singer, and whatever. After combat, when we became a special service unit, we were going all over the place in the 274th doing our show, among other things. And in Wiesbaden, there's a band show, and I was back there in 1978. The same piano I played on there was still there.
I'll be darned.
Oh yeah, in the band shell in the park, beautiful. And there was a trapdoor in the stage. And Mo came out of the sax section, and he put a turban on and a robe, and he was the Swami. And he was getting interviewed by this other guy. And then we put a blanket in front. We had an act we developed, and he disappeared. Well, in Wiesbaden, he went through the trapdoor on the stage, never came back. And if we didn't have a trapdoor, he got the turban off real quick on the robe, and he would sit back down in the sax section. And I remember one time a guy yelling out in the audience, "Oh, there he is! He's in the sax section." So we had a ball with that.
Yeah.
But now, in Chicago, Vern Staley, who I'm rooming with right now, we were having lunch, and he said two things happened to me in Chicago. I was a first timer on the reunion, and I had to do the, talk about myself. I said, number one, to the group, I said, I had qualms, I still did 2 years ago, about being out of Company A, out of the line company, and into a relatively safe situation, and then doing really what I wanted to do. And how many guys were able to experience that, And I said I had qualms. After I got done talking, I got chewed out. You know what they said to me? This speaks well for the organization. They said, "Bob, don't you ever have qualms about what you did or didn't do." They said, "You were part of us as much as anything." Now, Vern Staley, we had lunch in Chicago. He said, "Bob, you don't know how good you made us feel when you were playing. When we heard you play," he said, "it was fabulous."
That was going to be my next question. How did the GIs receive the music in every town?
I've got pictures even with me right now. I had them with me. There's one, I think that's in there. We had one picture taken Associated Press, and it went all over the country.
Yes, I've seen this one.
Yeah.
This is in the history book.
Yeah, it is. And
I'll shoot this later.
oh yeah,
With the camera. Yeah, I'll shoot all those later.
That's
yeah.
one. Now I'm in there, but I'm not playing because I didn't have a piano at that point. I'm right there.
Okay.
And that went all over the country. We kept getting it back for 3 months from various people. It was Associated Press. And we were well received. I mean, the guys, we did a good show. Coming back, and Sam Connolly always said, "You keep what you're doing. I'm going to do what you're doing. I'm going to get you home early." We came home with the 3rd Division in October of '45. The rest of the 7th Division went into occupation. So I got home on the boat. We were on the Queen Elizabeth I. When we went back with the officially 70th Division, we played in London, we played at the Rainbow Corner, we played on the ship, Queen Elizabeth I. The last day out, we played our show 8 hours in a row, 8 times. Our show lasted about 50 minutes, and they had the lounge open on the Queen Elizabeth, and they brought the whole regiment in, I think. One group would come in and the other go out in the 5-10 minutes in between, and then we started again. I was recalling our opening number on the show after all the things that went on in the Cold War. You know what it was? It was Benny Goodman's arrangement, the big band arrangement, which was published, of Mission to Moscow. I'm thinking, man, we're playing Mission to Moscow like we were playing about we were playing about a bunch of heroes. But then, you know, the thing turned around later.
Right,
And we wouldn't have been playing Mission to Moscow 2 years later.
I'll be darned.